setting boundaries are only one step of the process. It's actually just the first step. It's not even the main work. The main work is upholding your boundaries. The stories that I've heard recently about people getting really upset that people aren't respecting their boundaries. And when they're friends of mine, I'm kind of like, but where's your maintaining your boundary, or where is your upholding your boundary? Because so often we end up in this place where we think we've told somebody a thing. We told them we don't like this and they keep doing it. Or we told them that we want things to be done a certain way or communicated a certain way and they're not doing it. And sometimes it feels like we're being really fucking lazy. Like this idea that we can set it and forget it. And that's actually not how it works, because it's actually not anyone else's responsibility to exist how we want them to. And of course, if they want to be in some kind of connection with us, some kind of relationship with us, then yeah, it's respectful and beneficial to both parties if both sides are mindful and aware and considerate of what the other person responds to. But the notion that when we decide that we have this new thing that we want to set a boundary around, and we tell somebody and we tell them 4, 5, 10, 20 times over that they should just change, and then them not doing so is disrespectful or they don't care, that's one interpretation, and that might be one small sliver of it. But it actually puts the work on other people to make us feel comfortable. Whereas if we set a boundary and it's not a real physical wall that one person has built, if you've just set a boundary, it's not tangible, right? It's just kind of this imaginary thing that's out there that in your mind feels very fixed and determined. But it's not to other people. And if we don't constantly do the work of maintaining that boundary and tell people when they've crossed the boundary, give them either the warning signal that you might be approaching a boundary if you can catch it in time, or if they crossed it, gently being like, hey, this makes me feel that way, or you said this thing or did this thing. Remember how we talked about it last time? I'd really value it if you did blank instead. There's kind of this inherent work and practice in building up that boundary that feels like we've shirked the responsibility on. Because the stories that I do hear from friends, but also strangers sometimes, about them trying to be better about boundaries, and yet these people, oftentimes parents, or the people closest to us, other loved ones, partners, just not respecting them, siblings. And it comes back to whether we've done the work ourselves, right? Whether we feel like we have communicated it clearly and accurately, whether we continue to do so on a regular basis, whether we have some, impact consequence tied to people crossing them. How do you actually uphold and maintain it in the same way that you would a muscle, right? Because all the boundaries we set in our head is not going to be obvious to everybody else. And also, they're going to forget. People in our lives are going to forget, because we're all too busy and we all have too much shit on our minds, and we're all too distracted to really be paying attention to not only ourselves but other people and their boundaries. And so the thing that I'm constantly checking myself on when I feel like someone did a thing that I didn't like and I start judging them for it in my head and I start playing out this story, I'm like, hold up, they actually didn't mean that. They probably didn't have an intention of doing X, Y, and Z. It's my job. If I care about my well-being, it's my job to continually point it out and tell them. And yeah, that can be tedious and that can feel like work and effort, but that is the work and that is the effort required to maintain and sustain our mental and emotional health, our relationships with our friends, the kinds of healthy relationships that have over time the possibility and the potential to grow into something really strong and nurturing. That only happens if we're constantly communicating what our needs are, or boundaries, and what we hope other people can, do for us instead. Of course, they can say no, and they can say they're too busy, and they can say we're demanding too much. But at the end of the day, if we have decided on boundaries that are really important to us for some reason, that help us maintain a certain level of health and sanity and peace, then that's the risk. And living in this world is risky. And people might not do what you want them to do. And that's okay. But if what we're trying to do is create a certain, peace around ourselves and a certain environment in which we exist, then it's our job to be constantly cultivating it and nurturing it and nudging it in the direction that we want it to go. Knowing that we're in a dynamic environment with other humans and we can't control them, but we can control this, right? And this and this. And so the more we do that and the more we practice it, the easier it becomes. And then the relationships you cultivate with others, if you care about reciprocity, you will start engaging only with people who respect what you have to communicate. And so it comes back to what work are we doing to ensure our boundaries and to protect them and maintain them and fortify them so that it's healthy and so that it's clear to other people how we want to interact with them as well as how we want them to interact with us. And that only happens if we're actively doing the work and getting our reps in, instead of expecting other people to read our minds or remember that one time we told them, or 5 times, or even 30 times we told them, whatever it may be. It starts to get to the point where you're like, this person doesn't see or hear me, then you can exit that relationship. But I just know so many people who are ending or exiting friendships, relationships of all kind because of this notion that these people should be more cognizant of things that we think are so clear in our heads, but often aren't.